Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our next installment of My Impact, our interview series where we speak with alumni to shine a light on what's possible with an Equal Justice Works Fellowship. My name is Vivian Martinez, and I'm a law student board member and Rural Summer Legal Corps 2020 alumni. Today, we're speaking with Koert Wehberg. Hi, Koert.
Hi, Vivian.
We are very excited to speak with you today. First, how did you become involved with advocating for disability rights and accessibility? What inspired this work?
So I am, excuse me, myself disabled. I was born visually impaired and now fully blind. I also have invisible disabilities. I have some mental illness, PTSD, depression. So I've always been interested in, even in high school, doing legal advocacy. And then in college, I met what turned out to be the executive director of my host organization, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, who was an alumnus of Hamilton College, my undergrad. And that's the first time I heard about what public interest law was and what it could do at a conference at the college. And after he spoke, I walked up to him and said, I know I'm not a law student, but I will work for you. I'll do anything for you, like whatever you need. And he was, so I badgered him long enough to start working at New York Lawyers, working with their disability advocacy practice. And then after college, I went to Syracuse Law, where they have a disability law and policy program. So I got to work in a clinic, actually working with faculty who had disabilities themselves and fellow students with disabilities being around. And it was really great to see other folks like me. And just to be able to harness my interest in disability law and learn all the ins and outs of it while in law school, so that and by the time I applied for and got this fellowship, I felt like I knew what I was doing. But I've always been interested in disability rights, just based on my own experiences of discrimination in the past, but also, wanting to help others. I've always had a very strong interest in that, and I'm happy to say I've maintained that over, even to today.
Wow, being grounded in the work is extremely important, and I can relate. And as a fellow, you helped address the physical barriers to accessibility that limit opportunities for people with disabilities in low-income communities of color. Can you describe some of the ways you were able to build effective community partnerships during your fellowship?
Sure. So one of the things that New York Lawyers for the Public Interest does, and one of their, I guess, founding, markers, is that they, use a community lawyering approach. So they work a lot with community organizations to achieve their goals, and certainly did a lot of direct service and representing clients, but also did a lot of know your rights trainings and meetings with community groups, especially in this context, Centers for Independent Living, which are federally funded and each state has, where people with disabilities can go to get assistance on everything from benefits to housing. So making, I grew up in New York, so I knew the neighborhoods, and I was able to hit the ground running by speaking with all the folks at independent living centers and other community groups that they, turned me on to. And also, being disabled myself gives me, gives me some credibility, and people were willing to talk to me, to hear what I had to say. That is, I think, a very difficult thing coming into a job, especially a fellowship, where you write on paper about all the lovely community things you're going to do. Then you actually have to meet the people who are skeptical, because, rightfully so, they're cynical. Like, what can one person do, to fix things? But certainly working with community partners allowed for, a lot of, whether it was everything from finding clients to, really knowing what the real problems were in the neighborhood, from a neighborhood centered view, instead of just looking at the dartboard and saying, no, I think this place looks inaccessible. Let's target
Mm,
that. Let's see what the community actually wants. And
right.
it's interesting. It turned out that accessible housing was an issue. So I sort of worked on some of that, which was not part of my original proposal really, but so incorporating what community wants, I think is key.
Absolutely. And is there anyone in particular that was really championing and supporting your fellowship in particular?
Well, in the community, there was a person. Her name was Christina Curry. Well, is I mean, first, she's still around. I moved. I don't live in New York anymore, but she ran the Center for Independent Living up in Harlem, and she was deafblind, a woman of color, and she was fantastic. She managed to be positive, yet realistic. Always, you know, always saying, okay, well, here's a new problem, and if we solve this problem, saying, all right, well, Court, I know you just worked on that, but I have this other issue. Maybe you can look at it. And but it was great to see. Um, as a brand new attorney, somebody who running an organization who had multiple disabilities, who you know was so connected and so determined, balancing determination, positivity, and also, you know, realism at the same time. And certainly, uh, could get frustrated. We all do, but definitely, I do still think about her.
Hmm. Well, that's a really exciting aspect about the fellowships is building community and feeling very connected to the work. What was the most exciting part about being an Equal Justice Works Fellow for you?
The annual conference. I'm just kidding. Um, Although that was fun. I think, well, definitely meeting other folks in the field. Law school was great to learn about the laws themselves and meet faculty and whatnot, but meeting other practitioners, whether young lawyers like me or veteran attorneys, and learning from them how things worked. It was, I think it's a great thing to learn how law is really practiced in the real world, and instead of a case book. Certainly it's different, and just learning out how to solve problems. Sometimes solving a problem does not mean taking a case all the way to Supreme Court. Sometimes it involves making a phone call, and problems can get solved. I think the best part of the fellowship was actually seeing concrete change, getting a ramp in, getting braille in, getting things, barriers removed. I think even though that was obviously my goal, to have it actually happen in quote unquote real life is really exciting. It's like, look what we can do. We can actually help somebody and have them, be happy. We can't fix everything, but just to see something, it really gives you a boost.
Oh my goodness, that's like really exciting to me. These wins definitely sound like they're leading to sustainable change. And can you share some highlights or any stories that stand out to you from your time as a fellow?
Well, certainly, I'll say that, like we got some changes in some large places. I'll say, like getting access to a large public university in the city, for blind students, adding Braille, adding assistive tech. And we did that without litigation, which was, I think, impressive. I will say that when I graduated law school, my goal was to sue the world, because that's what solves every single problem. And we, certainly litigation did, as later in my career become more important, but just, we did a lot of negotiating there to get the college to understand how this was important. Getting ramps installed in a, to make apartment accessible in a low-income co-op for someone, even though the landlord was not thrilled about it, to put it mildly. But that's the story where the client never gave up. She wanted access to where she lived, which shouldn't really be too much to ask. They also, going to go back to Christina Curry, there was a drugstore chain that wasn't accessible to people who were deaf, and we worked with them to make their telephone system accessible to deaf customers, including they used to run contests, and Christina was very upset that she could not enter them on the phone. So we worked with them, their general counsel, and he was actually, not every defendant is terrible. Sometimes it's just a matter of them hearing what the problem is and saying, oh, well, I think we can make that happen. It's always worth trying to resolve something politely at the beginning, or at least, through a phone call or a letter. Before, filing that complaint, certainly that's eventually necessary in some cases, but in others, you can try to work it out.
And that leads into our next question. What are the most important things to consider when working to advance disability rights?
The most important. Well, I think if you are someone who has a disability or is an ally or family member of, I think the first thing to remember is that it can be a difficult road. By now you've seen, whether through your own experience or those of your friends or family, that there are certainly tough days, but hopefully you've seen how your advocacy can get somebody services or get them seen by other people. I think that's really important for people with disabilities to be seen by others, and I think that's how we get greater accessibility and just advocacy, whether it's now seeing the A added to DEI, or getting people with this, getting non-disabled folks to realize that when you talk about minority population, marginalized groups, people with disabilities are in there. Don't forget us. But I think also it's important that people see advocates who have disabilities out there, not just folks without disabilities advocating on their behalf. I think it's good for the clients to see that when you walk in the room, or, obviously not every disability is visible. So I think it's important for folks to be candid if they, to the extent they're comfortable, because it really helps the client. The clients are usually, they're unhappy, their lives are difficult. But just knowing that there's, someone advocating for them who understands what they're dealing with, it really helps them out. And I've seen that transformation, which, again, I'm not here to inspire to, this isn't inspiration porn or anything, but I will say that genuine experiences really help the cause. And when when the defendant sees an attorney with a disability, or learns how, how well as an advocate, who you're fighting for, that this isn't just the typical, they might be used to the pro bono lawyer, who we love pro bono, but somebody who just is doing this because they have 5 hours that they need to fill, that you are genuinely passionate about, fighting for your client or your cause, in disability advocacy. It does change minds, and it gets recognition, so that the next time a problem happens, this person thinks, oh, I dealt with this issue before, or someone like this before. I think I'm going to just fix it this time, or I don't need to be sued or, otherwise, accosted to get this fixed. And I know that was a very long answer to your question.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you. And how did your fellowship affect the course of your career after your project ended?
So I stayed in disability rights. I actually I moved to Philadelphia. I mean, my now wife and I live in Philadelphia. She was from Philadelphia, but I managed to get a job with Disability Rights Pennsylvania, which is a statewide organization similar to New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. And I stayed there for 8 years working on doing a lot of special education, a little bit different work for me, but did end up, I'll say, getting one of my better victories with one of my colleagues over there. We settled a class action getting kids with autism applied behavior analysis therapy through Medicaid in Pennsylvania. And obviously it's not as clean and simple as that. And there's still issues with the case, but we managed to achieve that victory, and that was great. It was certainly different from what I had done before, and was a lot of work. One of the attorneys we were supposed to work with dropped out, so it was just two of us. So that was a great learning experience, and doing a lot of due process hearings and being in federal court. That was great to get my do my litigation experience. But I did eventually want to try something else. So I became the executive director of the mayor's office for people with disabilities in Philly. So working sort of in the political lens, it was a political appointment, in Philly, and it overlapped with the pandemic. That was very difficult. I mean, on the one hand, we were able to do some good things, like, there were folks who couldn't get to food sites, so we created programs so that they could get food safely without having to expose themselves to COVID. This is before we had the vaccine. Certainly, job was different as far as supervising staff, working on an ADA self-assessment of the city, completing that, even though that was 20 years behind schedule. So it was a very fulfilling job, but it was not a law job. I mean, certainly my law degree came in very handy. But I did that for around 2 years, and then I decided that I wanted to go back into the more direct advocacy role. I didn't want my law degree to get dusty, so I took a position with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights in the Philadelphia office. So now I deal with everything from 504 to ADA, Title IX in the Pennsylvania, Delaware, West Virginia, Kentucky, Maryland. So and I'm happy here. I'm proud to have stuck with disability rights and civil rights advocacy, since I don't do just disability now, I do some other things. But it's been over 14 years since I graduated law school, so I'm still in the field.
And how has the evolution of your work made you a better advocate, would you say?
Hmm. I think it's been, just over the years, evaluating what strategies work, what strategies don't work, what's going to work faster for this person than this, whether is a demand letter better than a lawsuit, than a phone call, than doing trainings, than just trying to evaluate what works best, and just experience, knowing when I talk to somebody, when I hear what they're talking about. I think knowing, I'm not going to say I know 100%, because I never will, but just knowing that I hear a scenario going, oh, you know what, dealt with that before. I can help you out, or I can assist you in doing things. I think one of the things I neglected to mention earlier was that I really am interested in plain language as far as teaching folks how to advocate for themselves. I think that, well, I don't necessarily encourage folks to go pro se and going to the courthouse on their own. But I think a lot of the times, if we give folks the tools, they can certainly talk to their landlord or talk to a business or talk to their school district. I mean, there are not thousands and thousands of Equal Justice Works fellows out there or public interest lawyers. So anytime we can get someone to advocate successfully for themselves, I think that's a good thing. So over the years, I've tried to incorporate that and tell people, even if I'm, now I'm in the role of neutral, as far as ruling on cases and so forth. But even if we're going to dismiss somebody's case, I try to at least, tell them that, here's some resources, here's something for you. I really don't like leaving people empty-handed. So I think that I've increased my, my compassion, but realism and knowledge of how the law works, and also that, the law is not static. It does change, and it's, you really can have an influence on how it's developed, and people should, remember that as they begin practicing.
Well, that leaves us in a great spot. Do you have any advice for young law professionals looking to get involved in public interest law?
Well, there's certainly a lot of work to do. So that's good news. I mean, it's good to have, you don't want all the problems to go away, then you don't have a job. So that's one thing. So the disability rights are still needed, whether it's long COVID or, other areas, of the law, education, etc. But my advice is to, listen to your clients, listen to what they want, use your, again, like I said earlier, whether you happen to have a disability or are an ally or family member, use that for your, that'll help you so much. It'll help you, get all of the information from a client. You'll learn more. I mean, yeah, sometimes you might learn more than you want, but I mean, you'll learn all the facts, and the more you know, the better you can advocate, and the more satisfied you will be. I think it's important to, people talk about lawyer burnout, and it's true, it's real. There have been times when I've said, that's it, I can't do this anymore, because you don't always win, contrary to what this interview sounds like. You certainly do win, but you do not always get what you want. You might not be able to take all the cases you want. Resources are finite. So I'd say you need to recognize that that's real, and deal with, obviously you're going to be sad some days, lean on your friends, your family for that, but also don't tamp down your victories. Enjoy them. Celebrate them, and celebrate that you got your clients what they wanted and deserved.
Thank you so much for joining us, Koert.
Thank you.